Scores are baseline for the state. And another important part of our context is that we last year had students from more than 12 different schools. Most kids came from district schools, but we had kids come from lots of different schools as well. And the other fact that we had over 40 students transfer into our school over the school year. And this is especially true for English language learners, that about half of our English language learners transferred over the school year. They weren't here with us at the start of the school year. And sorry for the small text, it looked big when I was on my computer. But I also want to stress that this is just one data point, not all of the data points which we are measured on and which we measure ourselves on. We like to look at ourselves holistically and look at our kids holistically, so this is just one way to look at how we're doing. And also, score results are provided individually and cumulatively. We're going to be looking at the cumulative scores. Individual scores are sent home to parents to review. I do have an example on the next slide, though, for us to just briefly look at. And for any school and district in the state, you can look up state test scores. So if you're curious, if you want to do a deep dive into different subgroups and statistics and numbers, you can do all that on that website there, which the state loves to have fun website names. But if you just look up CASP 2018 results, you can find those. And the other thing to note is that our results are compared with our DSD for obvious reasons, but as we're serving kids in this community, that we are in part held accountable to how we do compared to the district. And when we're looking at the scores there, you have to see that there are 4 levels measured when the charts come up, that there's level 1 is standard not met, level 2 is standard nearly met, level 3 is standard met, and level 4 is standard exceeded. It's that I had to cut a lot out so it didn't have identifiable content, because this is from one of our students' scores. But basically, when we were looking at our individual score reports, great news that came out of this, and thank you, Chris, and some of the teachers who did some of this backup research. Looking at our score reports, we saw that most of our kids moved up a level. So if you can look here, that this is the student's score in 4th grade, which they're just on the edge of nearly meeting the standard, but they technically did not meet the standard. Whereas last year, they had met the standard. So they technically bumped up 2 levels, but you can see it's close to being 1 level. But most of our kids moved up, unless they're already at the exceeding level, moved up at least 1 level, which is proof as the program over the year. And for further context for the state test report, so kind of soak this in before we go into the other charts. The state kind of norms the results. You can see that the bands kind of fall almost evenly between the percentage bands. So this darker blue is level 1, so not met, nearly met, met, and exceeded standard. All right, so here's the cumulative scores for English language arts for the Ross Valley School District. On the left-hand side, you can see for the district as a whole, you can see they did very well. That in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, you have most of the kids either meeting or exceeding the standard. And that's definitely better than the state average. And on the right-hand side, you can see Manor, which a lot of our kids came from, and where this was a program prior to this year. You can see they also did fairly well, maybe not as well as a whole as the district, but you can see in 3rd, and then they got slightly better in 4th, and then better again in 5th. And these are our cumulative scores follow a similar trajectory of doing pretty well in 3rd grade, better in 4th grade, and much better yet again in 5th grade. Those are pretty incredible scores for our 5th grade English language arts students. And then we also break the scores down into different subgroups. And tonight I'm just going to focus on our English language students and our non-English language learner students. And for the sake of time, I did not do this for the district, but I encourage you to do so. You can do so online. If you look at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, these are students who are proficient in the English language. That we have almost 70% of our 3rd graders exceeded the standard in English language arts, which is pretty incredible. And then you have almost a combined 75% in 4th grade, and then almost combined around 80-something% in 5th grade for our students who are proficient in the English language, which I think are great results. But that is counterbalanced by, excuse me for the paper here. So you can see this clearly by our English language learners. They didn't break it up by 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade because I think there wasn't a statistical amount that wouldn't make so you can see individual students' numbers in there. But you can see that that rate isn't as good as it is for proficient students, which makes sense. You have a small percentage who exceeded standard, none that met, a bunch who nearly met, and a group that didn't meet the standard.
That's for the state.
That's for
that's
us.
for us.
That's
And
for
that
us.
was, so that's 13 students total.
Yeah, it's 13 students total, and then to note on there, and when you look at our cumulative score versus the district's cumulative score, that if you were to pull out kids who are proficient in both, our kids did better than the district students on most measures. But if you look at when we add English language learners into that, we have 13 students, which is a much higher percentage compared to the district. The district has last year had between 3rd grade and 8th grade, because that's their count is based upon that. They had 28 total English language learners. They didn't test all of them, they only tested 24. But when you take that percentage, we have a much higher percentage of English language learners. And then looking at the math scores, these are the state scores again. Again, fairly even amongst the grade spans. You can see there's something going on with math as time goes on. Again, here's the district's math scores. The district students did very well, as you can see. About 75% were exceeding or meeting standards in 4th grade. Slightly smaller, but still a good percentage in 5th grade. And then at Manor, better than the state. Not as good as the district overall, but all right scores. And then these are our math scores, which you can see in 3rd grade. You can see again a high percentage of kids, almost about 70% of kids meeting or exceeding standards. That shrinks a little bit over time to where we're hitting around 60% in 5th grade. Again, pull out students are proficient in the English language. So these are non-English learners that, if you look at 3rd grade, we have an overwhelming percentage of our kids who are doing well in the English language arts portion of the test. And that gets a little bit smaller in 4th grade and smaller in 5th grade. It was math, sorry. getting dry mouth up here. And then, sorry about this again. And then for math, you see kind of the same type of results that we have for English language arts, where we have a small percentage of kids who are meeting standard and most are nearly meeting standard.
Did we, so 13 students is the total that we had that could be tested, so all of our students took the test?
Yes, all of our English language learners tested.
Okay.
And we had, for our results, we had one student total who didn't take the test, and there was a student who didn't complete a test and then, I forget what it was, moved before they could finish the test at the end of the year. So we didn't have complete results for one student, and the other student had just moved to the school and didn't take the test. And for context on English language learners, this is for at the state level, English language learner math scores, which are pretty atrocious. And you also have to take into account that when you're looking at math, math isn't just numbers anymore. There's a lot of text involved and a lot of rich text, which can be difficult to decode if you're an English language learner.
Right.
I think it's a great direction that we're moving in with Common Core, but it presents a challenge for us and how we meet the needs of English language learners. So this is the state level English learner scores. So what we did as a staff is, one, we braced ourselves before looking at the scores, because we knew this is our first year and we thought we were going to do, we're expecting poor results, and we're happy to say that we got, good results. I wouldn't say that I always want our kids to be doing better, and so there are points where we can identify and have identified where we can do better. But I think for our baseline year, considering that we started with 120 something kids and ended with about 160, and we have a higher percentage of English language learners, and we have a decent number of students in special education, and they all tested, that we did fairly well for our baseline year. So what we did is we met as a staff and looked over all of our results, did a deep dive. We kind of an abbreviated version of what I did tonight, and then we talked about what are our areas of need, and what are our areas to pat ourselves on the back, then move on from there, and what are our areas of need. So what we did is we looked at individual cases of kids, like this kid needs some extra support here, which we generally knew from just having that student the year before. And we also looked at programmatically areas where we can improve our English language arts and math instruction. And this year we're also administering this called NWEA MAP test, which has no affiliation with MAP, a former program. But really these are standardized tests that we can administer to all of our kids. It's computer adaptive. So we can see if there's a kindergartner performing at the second grade level, we can see that. Or if there's a third grader performing at the kindergarten level in a certain area, we can see that. So we're administering that to all of our kids. I'm really interested in the results for K2 because there's no state testing for K2. We're also going to be doing some of the interim assessments from the state. But know that this isn't everything that we do and day in and day out. But this is just, we do get some good data from these assessments. But really, we came to see that, at the state and county and district and school level, the real work is with English language learners, and that's no different for us. And we sat down and had good conversations over the past couple weeks of how we can better serve the needs of our English language learners, how we can better leverage our intervention and EL support teacher, how we can recall some of the strategies that the teachers already have in their back pockets, areas for professional development where we can improve. So we're just kind of looking at a broad and broadly and deeply how we can better serve that demographic. And so I just kind of covered that. So it's, we're looking at our strategies, and we're also looking at creative ways to provide support for students where we can work with parents to help them work with their kids on their learning and homework. Also look at potential for doing some kind of after-school tutoring for students who need an extra push, which, is not taking us off the hook for what we need to do in school as well. It's just kind of, how can we support these kids who historically, statewide, countywide, have just not done well and have been underserved? And how can we better meet their needs? Questions from the board?
I think it's really great that we're also doing that testing on the K through 2 students, because we really know that the sooner we can intervene where students need the help, the better the results later on in their time with us. So obviously we didn't have all these students who we tested, for their entire K through whatever grade they're in. But to be able to go back and make sure that we're doing the intervention that we need to in the earlier grades, so that we don't get a lot of kids at 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade with, not having had their needs met earlier, I think is also equally important. So that's great that we are doing some other types of assessments to help us to identify. Not that I don't think we were doing it before, we just weren't using that particular method to do it. But I think, it's also good for us to make sure that we still continue to support the students in 3rd, 4th grades who obviously need it. So I appreciate all the extra work and time that's being put in to make sure that we're helping these students who really probably needed more intervention earlier now at the point where they are to get it.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that because I noticed I teach 4th grade math. And what I noticed is the kids that I had last year who had come through math and who had had Erica the previous year, not as a math teacher, but they were at Manor, and that whole group was kids who had been in math. They were well prepared. They came in, they did well, they were able to score high, and they just were able to function at a pretty strong level in math. But a huge number of kids from other schools and other programs who came in were not there. There were a few that came in and they were like strong in math, that's great, their schools were doing a great job, but there were a lot of kids who came in really, really low in math. And it's very hard in 1 year to then get those kids up to where they're meeting standard. They came in very low. Got the same thing again this year. Handful of kids who came in from another school who were very low. And so it's challenging to try to keep them working at the grade level, but also be backfilling with the gaps that they have. So that's what we're trying to do. We don't want to just work on, the 2nd and 3rd grade skills that they miss. We want to make sure that they're continuing forward, but it's challenging. The other thing I wanted to note is that we had a very high percentage of kids who were exceeding standards. Not so many that were meeting, which I think is fascinating. Like our kids that are kind of getting it are getting it really well. What I'd like to see is there's also a big group that are just below meeting standards. And some of them are really just below. And so it feels like that's where we need to be putting our energy, is to get those kids to standard, keep pushing to get those kids up to standard, because they're close. So not all of them, but a lot of them are close. And, as I was analyzing some of the individual results, there were kids that didn't just jump 1 level, but jumped 2 levels. And that was really exciting to see. Like some kids really made a lot of growth last year.
Luke, how often do you do that NWDA? Is that like once at the beginning of the year, or?
It's meant to be done more than once a year. It's a growth.
So it doesn't take real long to get.
It takes a long time.
Takes
to
way
get.
too long.
Yeah. That's something we're looking at. It takes a long time to.
But it gives you some really good information.
Yeah, and we haven't really seen all the information yet because we haven't gotten through it.
Okay.
But we're hoping we can have. It's supposed to give us some really good information.
Okay. So is that you give it at the beginning of the year and then maybe check it halfway through to see how things are working?
And it gives you, basically, because it's administered all over the state and all over the country.
Okay.
It gives you a growth of where kids are going to be, where they should be at the end of the year, based upon where they are now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, just more on that is it kind of feels like with the upper grade kids who just tested in the end of May, it feels like we're turning around and doing it again. It seems like a lot, and
Oh,
so
so
we
you
might.
do this for the upper grades too?
Right, so it
Okay.
feels like we may rethink that next year,
Okay.
but maybe a mid-year assessment would be really helpful to just
Okay.
sort of see the growth
Right.
that they've had.
So you can choose when you do it and how often you do it?
Yeah, and which kids are, go through the assessment.
So you don't have to even have everybody do it, you can just,
This year, we're trying it for everybody.
right, and just see how it works.
And this also gives us data points that are standardized across the K-5 program,
Mhm.
so we can really look at our whole program
Right,
and
and
say,
just see gaps and see where they're doing well, and, you know, I can see that.
you know, we can articulate up and down, like, this is where we can, well, if kids are in third grade here and they're not getting this, where can we pin it down in K1 and 2?
Okay, okay.
More discussion.
I appreciate you guys being so specific and really trying to understand, where kids are and what pieces are missing that are, you know, because I think that's really critical, right? It's really trying to understand the detail so that it can inform your teaching. So I really appreciate your dedication to.
And another part of this is we really want to catch kids early, and we don't want to see at the end of the year that a kid wasn't getting it.
Right.
And this also is part of our catch for intervention and special education too, just to make sure that we're seeing gaps. Now this is not the, like I said, not the only data point. Our teachers give assessments when kids don't even realize they're being assessed in class all the time. And every staff meeting, we're talking about kids and, flags that are being raised with kids who need extra support. So this is just part of all of that. Again, we also want to be careful about not over testing.
Right.
And that not being the driver of everything that we do.
And I really think that, that our students who are EL students, their scores are significantly lower, and that's what we're focusing on. And I think it's gonna really help. I think it's gonna take a few years to actually see all the work that we're doing. Because last year, most of those kids came in new to us, and a lot of them came in, halfway through the year. And so we didn't have much time to work with them. I think with some of those kids, it's gonna take, working with them in kindergarten, and first grade, and second grade.
Right.
And then I think that those scores, when they get to third grade, are gonna be stronger, because we're gonna have that consistent program. And
Right.
we really are focusing on addressing their needs.
Yeah.
Okay. No more board discussion. I will go out for public comment. This is just a discussion item though, so we're not taking any action this evening.